Imagine preparing for the biggest day of your life, the wedding day you've always dreamed of. You've planned every detail, every moment, and you're about to walk down the aisle to marry the person you believe is your perfect match. But then, a simple blood test, something that was supposed to be routine, reveals a truth you never saw coming. Megan Daniels was about to marry Jordan, the man she thought she knew better than anyone. But the results of that test revealed a shocking reality, one that threatened to tear everything apart. What was supposed to be a joyous occasion became the beginning of a nightmare. But that was only the beginning. As Megan uncovered more, she was forced to confront a betrayal so profound, it left her questioning everything she had believed. And then a death that would forever change the course of her life. Megan Daniels had always believed in love at first sight. When she met Jordan, it felt like the universe had aligned to bring them together. From the start, there was something magnetic about him. His charm, his laughter, the way he made her feel like the only person in the world. They shared so much in common. And from every conversation to every date, it only seemed to grow stronger. With every passing day, their bond deepened. And soon, the idea of a future together felt more certain than ever. For months, Megan could see nothing but a lifetime of happiness. The way Jordan made her feel was like a dream she never wanted to wake up from. Their relationship moved quickly, but it all felt right. Each moment together felt like it was meant to happen. Family gatherings, vacations, quiet nights spent talking about everything and nothing. They created a life that seemed to be perfectly crafted for them both. As their wedding day drew nearer, Megan couldn't help but be excited. Every detail had been carefully planned. The dress was ready, the invitations were sent, the guest list was set. She could already imagine walking down the aisle, the man she loved waiting for her at the altar, the joy of becoming his wife. The future seemed bright and full of promise. Nothing could touch their perfect world. The two of them had talked about children, about growing old together, about building a family. They envisioned a life full of love, laughter, and shared memories. Jordan had always been so attentive, so caring. He seemed to understand her in ways no one else ever had. Their relationship felt like it was built on trust and understanding, something most people only dream of. On the outside, everything appeared flawless. Megan had found someone she believed she would spend the rest of her life with. To her, the relationship was everything she had ever wanted. There was no reason to doubt it, no sign that things might not be as they seemed. Megan and Jordan had always planned to take the usual steps before their wedding, making sure everything was in order. A blood test, something simple and routine, was just one of those details. They had no reason to think much about it. After all, it wasn't uncommon for couples to check their health and make sure they were both in good shape before starting a life together. It was just a precaution, or so Megan thought. When the results came back, Megan didn't expect much more than a few standard health details. What she wasn't prepared for, however, was the discovery that would completely alter everything she thought she knew about Jordan and about their future. As she scanned the test report, one line caught her attention. A genetic marker, something out of the ordinary. At first, it seemed like nothing more than a mistake, a fluke. But when she examined it further, the implications became undeniable. The blood test results left Megan in a state of disbelief. She couldn't fathom how this could be possible. Jordan had never once mentioned having children. They had talked about starting a family in the future, yes, but it had always been something they envisioned for later. They were focused on their lives together, their marriage, their future. So why was there a genetic marker pointing to a child he never spoke about? Her mind raced as she tried to make sense of it. There had to be an explanation. She considered every possibility, each one more unsettling than the last. Could it be a mistake? Could this be some sort of clerical error in the lab? But even as the thoughts flitted through her mind, A nagging feeling refused to go away. Megan knew that this wasn't something that could easily be explained away. This was real, and it was pointing directly to Jordan. The more she thought about it, the more questions piled up. Who was the child? How long had Jordan been keeping this secret? Why had he never told her? She had always trusted him completely, believed every word that came out of his mouth. Yet now, that trust felt fragile, like it could shatter in an instant. The person she thought she knew so well, was he really the same man she had been about to marry? Each moment that passed made her feel more uncertain. Megan didn't know whether she was overreacting, but her gut told her otherwise. Something about this didn't sit right. She felt as though she were standing at the edge of a cliff, staring into an abyss she hadn't anticipated. What was she supposed to do with this information? Jordan had always seemed like the perfect man. They had built a life together, a life she was about to commit to for the rest of her own. But now, this test, this small paper, had raised doubts she couldn't ignore. She wondered how well she really knew him. Had she missed signs? Did this discovery mean she had been living in a fantasy all along? Megan didn't know how to approach him. How could she? She was afraid that the answers he would give might unravel the life they had planned. But she also knew she couldn't let this go. She needed to confront him, face the truth, whatever it was. She needed to understand what was going on, even if it meant her whole world would change. What would you do if you found out your fiancé was hiding such a big secret? Let us know in the comments. Megan couldn't stop herself. She spent hours searching online, sifting through old photos and social media profiles, trying to piece together anything that could explain what was happening. And then she found it. A Facebook page hidden behind an old name belonging to someone she didn't recognize. A picture of Jordan with a woman and 2 young children. The caption was casual, almost like it was just another family photo. But for Megan, the discovery hit hard. This wasn't just any family. This was Jordan's family, his wife and 2 children, all of them living in another state. Her mind struggled to process what she was seeing. The picture was so ordinary, so normal, yet it felt like everything she had ever known had just been shattered. How could he have kept this from her for so long? For months, they had talked about the future, about a life together. They had shared their dreams, their hopes, their plans. And now, Megan felt like she had been living in a lie. What was worse was the realization that Jordan had not only hidden this family from her, but had also managed to create a separate life in another state. She couldn't understand how he could look her in the eyes every day, promise her a future, and never once mention that he had a wife and children waiting for him somewhere else. She had always trusted him completely. But now, Megan's heart was heavy with a mix of anger, betrayal, and confusion. The world she had known no longer made sense. As the pieces continued to fall into place, Megan became obsessed with finding more answers. She reached out to mutual friends, family members, and even started searching for old acquaintances who might have known something. The more people she contacted, the more she learned about Jordan's past, and the more unsettling the picture became. He had been married before, years ago, but had never spoken about his ex-wife or their children. No mention of it. It was as though that part of his life didn't exist. Yet, here it was, laid out before her like a hidden chapter that had been kept in the dark. Megan needed to know everything. She wasn't ready to confront Jordan yet, not until she understood the full extent of what had been happening behind her back. But the more she dug, the more questions piled up. How long had he been living this double life? Was he planning to leave his family? Or had he intended to keep them both? The secrets kept growing, one after another, and the weight of them was becoming unbearable. The discovery of Jordan's hidden family was a shock, but it was only the beginning. As Megan pieced together the fragments of information she found, she realized that nothing in her life was as it seemed. What she thought was the man she loved, the man she was about to marry, had lived a completely different life, a life that Megan had never known existed. And now, the betrayal she felt was more than she could process. It cut deeper than just a simple lie. It shattered her trust in everything she had believed about Jordan. Megan couldn't take it any longer. After days of searching for answers, piecing together bits of a story she never knew existed, she had reached a breaking point. The truth she had uncovered was too much to ignore, and the anger and betrayal built up inside her like a pressure she could no longer contain. The rehearsal dinner was supposed to be a celebration, a final moment of joy before the wedding. But for Megan, it had become the perfect moment to confront Jordan and demand the truth he had been hiding for so long. The room was filled with the laughter of friends and family, glasses clinking, the sound of conversations drifting through the air. But Megan's mind was elsewhere. Every word spoken felt like a distant echo as she watched Jordan move around the room, oblivious to the storm that was about to hit. Her hands trembled as she gripped the edge of the table, the weight of her decision pressing down on her. She couldn't wait anymore. She needed to know, and she couldn't stand the thought of another day in the dark. Without warning, Megan stood up, the room falling silent as all eyes turned toward her. Her voice broke through the hum of conversation, loud and sharp. She could feel the gaze of every person in the room on her, but nothing mattered more than the confrontation that was coming. She was no longer the bride preparing for her dream wedding. She was a woman whose trust had been shattered, and she was demanding answers. "How long were you planning on keeping this from me?" Megan's voice cut through the air, raw with emotion, trembling with the intensity of her anger. The words hung in the room like a weight, everyone now waiting for Jordan's response. She had never seen him look so calm, so composed. His smile had faltered only for a brief second, but then it was gone. His eyes met hers, and in them, Megan saw nothing but confusion, no hint of guilt. Jordan stepped forward, his voice steady but laced with the same calmness that had always disarmed her. "You're overreacting. This is nothing. I've always been honest with you." His words were smooth, almost dismissive, but Megan could see the slightest flicker of discomfort in his eyes. She wasn't fooled. The lies were beginning to unravel, and he was trying to hold it all together. Megan's heart raced, the flood of emotions almost too much to process. She had trusted him with everything. And now, here he stood, denying the truth she had discovered. The weight of it all was suffocating. She could feel the anger rising, and with it, a clarity that cut through the fog of confusion. "Honest? You've been living a double life." Her voice trembled as she spat the words, each one carrying the force of the pain she felt. She wanted to scream, but she held herself together, looking directly into Jordan's eyes as she spoke. "A wife and kids? How could you hide that from me? For how long?" The room was still, the silence pressing in on them. The guests exchanged uneasy glances, unsure of how to react, unsure of what they were witnessing. Jordan's calm exterior began to crack, his usual confidence slipping as he searched for the right words. But there was no easy answer. How could he explain this? How could he defend what he had done? Jordan hesitated, his face a mask of frustration and guilt. "Megan, it's not what you think. This isn't what you think." His voice softened, trying to soothe the tension, but it only made things worse. Megan could see right through him. She had spent enough time with him to know when he was being truthful and when he was trying to manipulate the situation. And right now, he was doing just that. Megan shook her head, feeling the sting of betrayal burn deep within her chest. "Don't lie to me," she said, her voice steady now, a quiet fury settling in. "I've seen the pictures. I know the truth. You were hiding them, your family, your past, like it meant nothing to you." "I was nothing to you." Jordan's face reddened, the first real sign of emotion he had shown. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. The words failed him, and for the first time in their relationship, Megan saw him falter. There was no more charm, no more excuses. Just the cold reality of his lies hanging between them, exposed for the world to see. For a moment, the room felt too small, too crowded with attention. The weight of the truth was suffocating, and Megan couldn't look away from him. She didn't know whether she wanted to scream, cry, or just walk away. All she knew was that she couldn't marry this man. Not after everything she had discovered. Not after all the lies. Who do you believe? Megan or Jordan? Do you think she had a right to confront him, or should she have waited? Comment below. The confrontation between Megan and Jordan left the room hanging in an unsettling silence. No one knew how to respond, how to react to what had just unfolded. Jordan stood there, struggling to find his words, and Megan, shaking with disbelief, stared back at him, the anger in her chest now replaced by an emptiness she couldn't explain. She had just uncovered the most painful betrayal of her life, and the weight of it was enough to make her feel like the ground had been ripped from beneath her. But the evening didn't end with the answers Megan had been hoping for. Just hours later, the phone call that Megan would never forget shattered whatever semblance of peace she had left. The phone call came in the early hours of the morning. Megan had just tried to go to bed, the emotional turmoil still gnawing at her. But when the voice on the other end of the line told her about the death, the words hit her like a punch to the gut. She was speechless for a moment, her thoughts completely clouded. She couldn't understand it. How could this happen? Why did it have to happen now? As the news settled in, the weight of it all grew heavier. Megan was forced to sit back and think. Was she truly being accused of something she hadn't done? Her mind screamed in confusion. She had no reason to hurt anyone, let alone take a life. She hadn't even known the woman long enough to form any kind of ill will. But the evidence, the way the pieces were falling into place, made it impossible to ignore the suspicion. The more she thought about it, the more she realized how easily it could have been twisted against her. The confrontation earlier that night, it had to be fresh in everyone's minds, and now the police were involved. With the police turning their attention toward her, everything that had seemed like a dream, her wedding, her future with Jordan, was slipping further and further out of reach. She had been in the wrong place at the wrong time, caught up in a situation that was spiraling out of control. But did that mean she was guilty? Or was there someone else who had a stake in this story? Someone who had much more to hide than Jordan had let on? All Megan could do was try to make sense of it. Her life, already turned upside down by Jordan's betrayal, now had a much darker layer. It wasn't just about the lies anymore. It wasn't just about the pain of discovering that the man she was about to marry had been living a secret life. It was about a life being taken and the horrific thought that she might somehow be connected to it, whether she wanted to be or not. She found herself pacing in her small apartment, replaying every detail of the night over and over again. Could she have done something differently? Could she have avoided the fight? What if she had left the rehearsal dinner earlier? What if she had never confronted Jordan? She felt as though she was trapped in a nightmare that she couldn't wake up from. The pieces of her reality were falling apart, one after the other, and she was helpless to stop it. The police would be knocking at her door soon. She could feel it. The weight of their suspicion was like a shadow looming over her, pressing in from all sides. But Megan had one question she couldn't shake. Who stood to gain from this? Who stood to lose? And who would do anything to cover their tracks? She couldn't let herself be the scapegoat for someone else's actions. But as her world crumbled around her, she was left with no answers. Only more questions. The police moved quickly, as they always did when a death was involved. But what had seemed like a simple case of a tragic death soon grew far more complex. As the days passed, the detectives pieced together clues, each one pointing more and more in Megan's direction. The timing of the murder was the first thing that caught their attention, just hours after her confrontation with Jordan. The argument at the rehearsal dinner, the anger in her voice, it all seemed too convenient, too fitting. She was the one who had been wronged, and now his wife was dead. To many, it appeared to be a case of an emotional breakdown leading to something much darker. It didn't take long for the detectives to put together a theory. Megan had discovered the truth about Jordan's secret family and, in a fit of rage, killed his wife. After all, what better motive than betrayal? What better reason to seek revenge on the person who had been at the heart of the lies she had just uncovered? The investigators were quick to pull Megan into their web of suspicion. Her emotional state, the timing, the confrontation, everything seemed to fit. She was the prime suspect, and now the detectives were looking for any shred of evidence to tie her to the crime. But as they dug deeper into the case, something didn't sit right with the lead detective. There were too many unanswered questions. Megan had no history of violence. She wasn't the type to lash out impulsively. And from everything he had gathered, she had no direct connection to the crime scene. The more he thought about it, the more certain he became that there was more to this than just a jealous lover taking matters into her own hands. The detectives expanded their investigation. They began looking into Jordan's past, his relationships, and his involvement in his wife's life. What they uncovered was unsettling. There were rumors that Jordan's marriage had been rocky for some time, that he and his wife had been living separate lives long before Megan had ever come into the picture. There were whispers that Jordan had been hiding things, not just from Megan, but from his wife as well. Was he truly the man he appeared to be, or was he someone capable of more? Could he have played a part in his wife's death? As the evidence started pointing in Jordan's direction, the detective couldn't help but wonder if this was all part of a much bigger story. Could he have been the one pulling the strings all along, manipulating Megan, hiding the truth from her for years, and using her as a pawn in a much darker game? Or was someone else involved entirely? Someone who had a reason to frame Megan for a crime she didn't commit? The more they uncovered, the more the story became muddled. The detectives began to explore other possibilities, other suspects, hidden motives, and conflicting accounts. Could someone have used the situation to their advantage, framing Megan to cover their tracks? Was there another side to Jordan's past that no one had yet uncovered? Could this be a crime of passion, or was there something more calculated at play? Megan, meanwhile, found herself caught in the middle of it all. The investigation had already begun to take its toll on her. With every new piece of information, with every new lead the police followed, the pressure mounted. She had no idea who to trust. Everyone seemed to suspect her. No one seemed to understand that she was as much a victim as anyone else. All she had wanted was to understand the truth, to confront the man she thought she loved. But now, she was trapped in a nightmare of accusations, and the walls were closing in around her. Could she ever prove her innocence? Or was she destined to be the scapegoat in a crime she had no part in? What do you think happened? Was Megan truly guilty, or was she framed? Who could have killed Jordan's wife? As the investigation moved forward, the detectives began to uncover new layers of complexity that no one could have anticipated. The more they learned about Jordan's life, the more they found discrepancies, things that didn't add up. It was becoming clear that no one had the full picture yet, and every lead seemed to only push the case further into a maze of unanswered questions. What had started as a simple murder investigation was quickly turning into something far more intricate, and the answers seemed to shift with every turn. Some theories quickly took hold. One of the leading ideas was that Jordan himself could have been involved in his wife's death. His relationship with her had been far from perfect, with increasing reports of tension, frequent arguments, and the emotional distance that had built up over the years. The detectives dug into Jordan's background, speaking to his acquaintances, his family, and even people who had known him during his previous marriage. There was no shortage of evidence pointing to cracks in his story. His wife's death, they speculated, could have been the result of a violent outburst, a final act of desperation from a man who had kept his secrets for too long. But as more information surfaced, so did other, more unsettling possibilities. While it was clear that Jordan had secrets, it became increasingly difficult to ignore the possibility that someone else might have been pulling the strings. The timeline was too precise. The fact that Megan had been the one to confront Jordan hours before the murder made it hard to overlook. Some speculated that it wasn't just a crime of passion, but something planned with precision, a way to destroy Megan's life in a calculated move. Someone had seen an opportunity, and they had taken it. Theories spread like wildfire. Was Jordan's wife murdered to silence her before she could expose something dangerous? Or was Megan, in her emotional state, manipulated into becoming the prime suspect in a scheme she didn't fully understand? As the police reviewed their evidence, they couldn't ignore the possibility that someone with a much larger stake in the outcome of the investigation had used Megan as a pawn. She was the one who had discovered Jordan's past, the one who had questioned him. Could someone have seen her as a threat to their own interests, someone who needed to be silenced? But there were other questions, too. Who was this mysterious person, if they even existed? Did they have access to the information Jordan had been hiding, or was it a case of someone who knew about the turmoil within the marriage? Whoever it was, they had planted the seed that led Megan straight into the line of fire. And as much as the evidence pointed toward her, it also seemed to point away from her. The deeper they went, the less certain the detectives became about Megan's involvement. The investigation was quickly becoming a tangled web of conflicting evidence and shifting theories. Each new discovery opened more doors, but none seemed to lead to a clear path. The police had their hands full, and as they sifted through the layers of lies and half-truths, it became obvious that there was something much more complex at play. Something beyond a simple love triangle, beyond a moment of jealousy. Theories that once seemed plausible were now crumbling under the weight of new facts. Was Megan innocent, as she insisted, or was there something she had yet to reveal? So, what's your theory? Was Megan truly behind the murder? Did anger and betrayal drive her to do something unthinkable? Or is there more to this story than meets the eye? Could she have been manipulated, pushed into a situation where she had no control? Or is she simply the scapegoat in a much darker game? The more you look into it, the more complicated the case becomes. New suspects, shifting motives, conflicting evidence. Everything keeps changing. So who really stands behind this tragedy? We want to hear your thoughts. Do you believe Megan is guilty? Or is she just another victim of circumstance? Or maybe the real killer is someone you haven't even considered yet. While the truth remains elusive, one thing is certain. Megan's life was destroyed by a single moment of discovery, and the crime she might never have committed. As she faces the consequences of a past she never knew existed, the lines between guilt and innocence blur. Is she the victim of a twisted conspiracy, or is there more to her story than we've been led to believe? For now, the story hangs in the balance, as the truth slips further from reach with every new twist. But as the investigation moves forward, the real killer might just be closer than anyone thinks. Stay tuned, because next week we dive into another case that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about betrayal, murder, and the people we trust most. Don't miss it. This one is bound to leave you on the edge of your seat. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you don't miss a single update on these shocking true crime stories.